Hi everyone! Who is here today? I am so excited to do this live today because it's on this Facebook group, which, let's be honest, I'm not very active on. So I'll come on once a month to give some free support to anyone that really needs it by offering some guidance on different aspects of psychology careers. And today, I guess I'm going to be sharing with you what you can do if you are starting out in psychology with nil experience. So one of the main questions that I get is, I've just come out of university, or I'm at university and nobody's willing to employ me. Nobody wants to give me a chance. People that want to have people in their jobs are asking for people with experience already. How am I meant to get into psychology without any kind of experience? So today I'm going to be sharing with you ways that you can really elevate your position and really think about how you can approach psychology career employment in a way that is going to be realistic and helpful for you to then hopefully gain a job. So today we're going to be focusing on specific things that you really need to pay attention to when you are thinking about going for jobs with zero experience. And the truth is that psychology is an experience-heavy field. So what that means is that it's very different to other kinds of fields where you can just go to university, come out, get a job. It's totally fine, like you'll be on like 30K or something like that. In psychology, it works a little bit differently because it's difficult to come out of just an undergraduate degree and then go into a job where you are earning about £25,000 to £30,000 per year, the typical salary that a 20-something wants to earn once they've finished university. The reason being is that psychology in itself, the degree, the undergraduate that you do, is not enough for you to then work as a qualified practitioner. You have to do additional training. It's a little bit like the medical profession, where you are starting off with the fundamentals, the basics, and then you build on it. The same way medical staff do, they do like their year 1, their year 2, I think it's called T1, T2, T3. It's similar in the sense where we also have to build ourselves up, but it's not as streamlined as it is for the medical profession, where they actually put you through the different years of their internship. In psychology, you have to find your own experience. You have to find your own kind of areas where you are growing, and then you are ready to undertake training. That is typically what happens. Now, of course, there are progression routes out there that don't require you to have much experience, but not many people know about these routes because they are not routes that are typically accessible via the NHS. So the important thing is that if you're starting out in psychology, you want to know that there are different ways for you to get into psychology careers. You can either do it on a funded basis or a self-funded basis. If you are wanting to go down a funded route of any kind, it's typically that you have to earn your position on the training. And what I mean by that is if you have a look at the entry requirements of any funded courses, what they will say is must have 1 year of experience, must have this much experience, must have this course or that course under your belt in order to train with us. So if you are trying to go towards any kind of funded routes, then it's important to set your expectations and know that actually they are going to be expecting you to gain some experience. So when you are obviously coming out of university, or even before you attend university, if you're thinking about joining the psychology field and wanting to go into a funded route, you've got to think about whether you have the capacity to do some work that may not pay you the best wage, but will give you a lot of invaluable experience. This is the thing about psychology, is you can get such amazing experience, but it's the salary that is the part where you kind of, I guess, miss out on when it comes to careers in psychology. The other route, obviously, is a self-funded route. So a lot of people don't know this, but when you go down some kind of a self-funded route, unless it's like a psychologist doctorate route, if it's like a psychotherapy or a counseling route, you typically can do that without much experience at all. So if you just come out of university, even if it's not a psychology degree, then typically people go down, like if they want to do it on a self-funded basis, they'll go down a psychotherapy route, which means that they don't have to worry about getting lots and lots of experience because they kind of start from the bottom in terms of that particular route. So that route will still, that training will still take them about 4 or 5 years to complete, but they'll be on it without having to do lots of experience stuff, if that makes sense. The other thing about self-funded routes is that sometimes they also want more kind of, I guess, maturity from you in terms of like life experience. So they're not so bothered about you having everything clinically in terms of experience or having like a lot of mental health experience. They're looking for more kind of life experience, and they look at you more in terms of your personality, the way that you are, the way that you want to enter the profession, your motives, your agenda for doing psychological work. They focus more around on that. Whereas if you look at the NHS and if you look at funded routes, it's very much about hitting criteria. It's very much about meeting certain requirements in order to then move into a certain funded route. So just be aware that you don't have to necessarily gain lots of experience if you can go down a self-funded route. I know it's not possible for everybody, but the option is there if you want to explore it and if you want to know more about it. Same goes with counselling. Counselling is completely a self-funded route. You don't even need a degree for counselling. So if you're completely new to psychology, things like psychotherapy and counselling are typically routes that people take if they're looking for a career change. So they might already be established in something else and they want to move into psychology. So what they're doing is they are taking a self-funded route because they have savings and they have things already kind of built up to allow them to have that career change. Again, that isn't possible for everybody, but that's typically what tends to happen with a lot of the self-funded routes. But thankfully, in the Psychology Career Service, because I'm sharing more and more information about psychotherapy routes, there are more youngsters and more younger people in their early 20s coming out of university and actually going straight into psychotherapy routes because they're like, this is probably going to save me a lot more time in the long term, a lot more money in terms of like waiting around to be on a better salary, just kind of like accepting that you're going to be going on to certain training which you have to fund. But by the end of that time, so for example, a psychotherapy route would be like 5 years. So by the end of like a 22-year-old that's just come out of university, by the time that they're 27, they would be on a full kind of accredited salary basis. And so obviously that is different because what tends to happen with the funded routes is that people wait until they're like 27, even longer, to get onto certain funded training routes. So they end up spending a lot more time in lower salary roles. This isn't just about salary. This is about helping you to understand how to build your multifaceted lives. I know that you want to have families. I know that you want to travel. I know that you want to purchase houses. Whatever your motives are, you know, we live in a capitalist economy. We need money to do certain things. And because of the way that the system has been structured around funded routes, it's hard for us to gain that salary that we need to be able to then build sustainable income to allow us for our multifaceted life. So that's why I'm just sharing that piece of information. So if you are starting, whether you are wanting to get into self-funded or funded routes, if you are just wanting to explore the field and figure out what's right for you, and you don't have any experience at all, and you've just been experiencing rejection, then today's video is going to be for you to think about how you can start getting experience with zero experience. So the first thing that you want to do is to not to underestimate the life experience that you have. A lot of the roles that you do get within psychology, especially the entry-level roles, let's be honest, they do want someone that has life experience or has a lot of common sense. So rather than worrying about whether you have everything that is on the job description and person specification, the main thing that you want to do is just demonstrate your common sense in fulfilling the competencies or the tasks that that job description and person specification is asking of you. So the best thing for you to do is to literally sit down with yourself and do a reflective exercise where you draw out a timeline of all the different experiences that you have been through in your life that may prepare you or that may have given you the skills that you need to be able to enter a mental health specific role. You might not think of it like this right now, but when you write things down, you'll be like, damn, I went through a lot of mental health stuff. I went through a lot of stuff that impacted me, and actually This has taught me about how to deal with this situation or that situation, deal with challenging people, deal with symptoms of depression. And even if you've experienced them, that doesn't mean that you can't say that you might be able to then understand how somebody else is experiencing it as well. Obviously, we all have different ways of experiencing mental health, but we also have common denominators. We also have shared understanding. So it's important to use your own personal and life experiences, whether they are mental health specific or not. It doesn't matter. It could be like a retail job that you've done and things that you've learned in terms of teamwork or supervising in your retail job that you can bring to a clinical or a mental health entry-level role. And again, showing that your skills are transferable by things that are situated on your timeline can help you to really demonstrate how you are appropriate for the role. So you don't have to say, oh, I've not done clinical, I've not done anything mental health related. Instead, you have to emphasize on the life experiences that you've had instead and show how they are transferable within some kind of mental health or clinical environment that you actually want to go into. So that is the first thing that you want to do, is to sit down with yourself and reflect. If you don't allow yourself to reflect on yourself, how are you going to allow your time, space to sit with someone else and reflect with them? In order to practice certain tasks and activities that are psychology specific, you've got to understand them for yourself. You've got to have a personal understanding of what it's like as well. Like, you won't know everything, but if you can adopt an activity and use it for yourself, then it will only help you to understand how you can implement it with other people. So sit down with yourself, focus on your life experiences, identify the adversities that you've been through, work experience, whether it be mental health or not, where you're team working alone, in challenging situations, whether you have kind of overcome certain things. Identify the specific areas of your life so that you can be extremely specific in the way that you show that your skills are transferable into certain mental health roles. If this is making sense to you, please comment in the comment section, because I like to be validated. So just comment in the comment section and let me know if this is making sense. The next thing that you want to do is really make sure that you're setting your expectation. I'm going to say something that you might not want to hear right now, but this is the ultimate truth. If you have come out of university or you are a person with zero mental health experience and you try to go into a full-blown practitioner role, you are going to be faced with rejection. It's as simple as that. It's not because you're not good enough. It's not because you can't do the job. It's because there is no evidence. There's no evidence that you're able to fulfill that in other roles before you get to that experience role. For example, if you are trying to apply for a therapy-based role, even if it's an assistant therapist, or if you're trying to apply for an assistant psychologist role, these are not entry-level roles. These are roles that people do when they have accumulated a little bit of experience, at least, working with people. In some cases, some employers want lots of experience before you enter those kinds of roles. I know they're really attractive for the work that you're doing, and I know they're really attractive for the salaries as well. But the whole point of it is that they're not just looking for someone to do the job. They want to make sure that it's going to be safe for them to do it as well. At the end of the day, this isn't just another admin job. This is a job where you're working with mental health. You're working with people's lives. You're working with people's well-being. They want to make sure that you can do the job. So obviously, if you have zero experience and if you're just attracted by the title and the salary, they're going to see right through you. So again, it's really important to set your expectations that, yeah, I encourage you, apply, see what happens, give it your best shot. But if you are faced with rejection because you don't have the evidence or the portfolio of experience that has built you up to that particular position that is experienced and that you want to do, then you have to be honest with yourself and think, okay, is it because I'm not good enough, or is it because I really just don't have the experience and I just need to get the experience? And once you build your experience up, you will then be able to demonstrate, how you can actually meet those particular requirements of that experienced role, because you'll have a better understanding of how things work in a clinical and mental health capacity. The other thing is that when you think about roles, set your expectations in the sense where you don't kind of get fixated by certain titles. Getting fixated on certain titles can actually hinder you in terms of your progress, especially if you're trying to move on to things like the doctorate. You don't need an assistant psychologist post. Let me repeat that. You do not need an assistant psychologist post to get into a doctorate or any kind of training funded post. You don't need it. Yes, it's helpful. Yes, if it's there, go for it. You know, jump on that bandwagon. Go for it. I encourage you, like, completely do what you need to be able to get that role. However, if you are becoming fixated upon that and it's not available in your area, there's not many opportunities around where perhaps you live or where you're situated, you're finding that the roles are kind of getting taken up very quickly, then it might stop you from actually getting the clinical experience that you could get in other kinds of roles. So for example, you've got support worker roles. I have known people that have gotten to educational doctorates and forensics doctorates and clinical doctorates that have just done, obviously, like support worker roles, but in different ways. So it's not just about doing one particular role for like a whole year or 2 years. Sometimes you do need a variety of experience, but they can be done in different kinds of roles. They don't have to be done in assistant psychologist roles. So just note that the more fixated you become upon roles, the harder it will be for you to focus on actually moving forward. Rather than focusing on roles, focus on services. Find your area of interest. For example, if you are interested in learning disabilities, in perinatal, in forensics, in psychiatric services, in complex eating disorders, look within those services for the roles that they have. The psychology field is quite sneaky, and what they do is they switch up the titles all the time. And sometimes you'll get like a random title, like you'll get like the typical ones like assistant psychologist or rehabilitation coordinator or support worker. But then somewhere in there, you'll get like a positive support worker. You'll get like a positive peer support worker or something like that thrown in there, because they're looking for people that are actually looking at their service rather than looking for specific titles that they just want on their CV. So again, be smart in your approach where you are not focusing on titles, you're focusing on services and interests that you actually have and where those interests lie in terms of different services. They could be school-based, they could be community-based, they could be inpatient-based, it could be anywhere. Again, it's important to search specifically on Google so that you're able to find these areas, these locations, so that again, you're able to see, you know, where you're actually kind of able to come across some of those roles. Again, like becoming a person that has lots of experience under their belt doesn't happen within a year's time. It takes time. So you've really got to think about kind of grading your approach towards getting experience. For example, if you have been applying for one particular role and you're faced with a lot of rejection and you don't think it's your personal statement, you don't think it's your CV, you don't think it's your interview skills, it might just be that you don't have the experience. So it might be that you have to look at other roles that do have criteria and where you actually do fulfill it, where you actually meet, you know, most of the criteria that it's set. So again, like this helps to manage your expectations. It's not personal. It's not a point that's against you. It's just the way that the structure works to implement safe practices in psychological services. Because again, if you don't have the experience and you end up going into a role and they expect you to do the job from the first day and you have no idea what you're doing, how is that going to make you feel? Some people might disagree and say, oh, it's better if you throw someone in the deep end. But we're not, like, again, we're not dealing with admin work. We're not dealing with creative work. We're dealing with people's lives. We're dealing with well-being. So we want to make sure that we're working safely, ethically, and effectively. And that's why you have to grade your experience to make sure you get to that point where you can then apply for the experience roles. But honestly, in some cases, you don't actually need huge experience roles in order to get onto certain training if that is your end goal. So just think about kind of looking at particular services and areas that interest you rather than focusing on particular titles. Lots of people start off with healthcare worker roles, support worker roles, even helpline support, helpline coordinator or helpline kind of hotline worker roles for mental health. And again, like you might be like, what can I learn by just sitting on the telephone? You're not just sitting on the telephone. Telephone is just an area in which you're delivering something, but it's the people that you're working with. It's the experience that you need with the people that's really going to help you to move into certain roles that you are finding desirable and that you actually want to kind of use to get onto certain training. So again, like rather than focusing on titles and the location even of, is it going to provide me with this experience or that experience? Think about populations that you want to work with, people that you want to help. If you've actually entered the profession and you've done it because you want to help people, then continue to stay grounded to that particular aim and focus on the kinds of people that you want to work with. And again, if you look at those specific things in terms of who you want to help and what you want to do with them, whether it be taking them out on trips, on visits, whether it be helping them with disorder-specific symptoms, whether it be supporting them with kind of dealing with educational difficulties, whatever it is, again, this will help you to apply yourself in an area where you're actually enthusiastic to work there, and you're not just working there for the sake of putting something on your CV and personal statement. At the end of the day, whenever you do get to that point when you are applying for certain training, you want to make sure that you're speaking about your experience enthusiastically, not just ticking a box. So you have to make sure that obviously that you are genuinely enthusiastic to, join certain training and interview for certain training. So if you haven't done work experience that interests you, it's going to be very, very difficult to demonstrate that, especially when they ask you questions like, why is it that you even want the role in certain interviews, which they do. They do that a lot nowadays. The final thing that I just want to touch upon is basically making sure that you have the documentation that you need to be able to apply for roles, even with zero experience. So lots of people get confused between CVs, cover letters, personal statements. Just two things. You've got your CV, and then you've got a personal statement or a cover letter. A personal statement and a cover letter is literally the same thing. Through the way that I've helped people, I've helped them with both cover letters and personal statements. Typically, we use personal statements for roles when we're applying. If they don't specify what you need to give, you just give a personal statement and attach a CV. But some services, some jobs will specify that you have to send over a cover letter, in which case you just have to turn your personal statement into a letter, and the format would be slightly different, but again, the information would demonstrate the same kind of skills and abilities and experiences that you've had. So you want to make sure that you have two pieces of documentation ready to go, because when you're applying for psychological employment, things can move very, very quickly, which means that when you see a job opening, you can go there the same day after work and it'll be gone. And again, the reason is that it's not because there's lots of people that are right for the role. It's because there's just lots of people applying for the role, because they all want the role and they all feel that they are appropriate for the role. So even if they've read through everybody's applications, like they don't read through everybody's applications and think, oh, we don't have enough candidates, let's leave it open. They just wait until they've got like enough applicants, whether they're suitable or not, and then they close the actual vacancy. So if you have a personal statement and CV ready to go, if you have it somewhere on your phone as well, so that if you're going through jobs and you're finding them whilst you're traveling or whilst you're out of away from a desktop, then you can use your phone to just attach those attachments into the job or into the application, whatever kind of application it is, and send it off. The important thing is that obviously, if you don't have that documentation available, you can end up missing out on lots of chances. So it's helpful to have like a CV and a personal statement ready to go, just so then you're able to kind of get those opportunities quickly and see how your CV and personal statement actually converts, whether it converts into an interview and a callback, whether it doesn't get you anywhere. And that will help you to gauge whether you need to work on your CV and personal statement, whether it needs more input, whether it needs more kind of tweaking, or whether it is fine and actually it's good enough. So again, like you have to have all of these things kind of ready and organized. And like if you apply through the NHS portals or other kind of portals, you typically can store your personal statements and CVs on the portals, but usually with private services, you can't do that. So you have to have that kind of saved somewhere so that you're able to attach it when necessary. So those are the main things. I'll answer your questions in just a second. So those are the main things that you want to focus on, is make sure that you've got the documentation ready to apply for the roles, to make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with the job description and person specifications for the roles that you want to apply to, and making sure that you're setting your expectations in a realistic way and not taking things personally. I know it can feel personal. I know it's hard when you've been spending lots of time applying for things, but set your expectations. Like, if you're not getting the jobs that you want, then take it down a notch and think, okay, is it the fact that actually I need to get more experience? Let me try and apply for something that I feel like I can do really well, and see if I can get that job, because that will help you to gauge how employers are viewing your experience. And then obviously making sure that you use your life experience and your skills in kind of your personal capacity to show how they are transferable and can help you to work in a professional, clinical, or mental health capacity, whatever kind of capacity it is that you're trying to go into. Let's have a look at what people are saying. Hi, Stacey. I'm glad it's helpful. Hi, Jemima. Thank you for being here. I'm glad it's helpful. Jamie said, I have been told that the role of a HCA in an inpatient health ward is not good enough experience to count towards a doctorate. Who has told you that? So a healthcare worker role, yes, if you're only doing that role, if you're not moving around trying to get lots of experience in different kinds of capacities, if you're not doing lots of different healthcare worker roles, and if you're just staying in one role for a good 2-year period, then yeah, you would only have experience maybe of working with one client group and one kind of environment. You wouldn't necessarily have experience of working with adults in primary care, for example, or outpatient care. So healthcare worker, if you've got lots of them under your belt, again, it depends on the university. It depends on how you demonstrate your experiences on paper. It depends on how good you are at showing how it's transferable. I think healthcare worker roles is good enough, but again, like, if you can use that to move into other kinds of roles, then you can then use that to gain further experience. I'm not saying it's the case for everybody where healthcare worker roles can work for everyone, but there has definitely been cases where people have got onto doctorates with just a healthcare worker or support worker role under their belt. But obviously they've done it in lots of different services and lots of different capacities, and not just been in one role for a long period of time. So just note that there is variety with the experiences that they've done at healthcare worker level. Is there any experience we can find as an undergrad psychic that will eventually help towards it? No, so you can start, so the smartest graduates, the smartest graduates are the ones that start building experience even before they've gone to university. So a lot of the times when you're doing A-levels, when you're doing college work, when you're in sixth form, sometimes you can do work experience placements. So if you know, I mean, at that stage, you probably don't know, but if you do know that you want to do psychology and you want to do something in mental health, start getting your experience from that time. If you're at university, try not to opt in for some kind of retail or admin-based job, although those are really helpful. But even if you do those jobs, try to do something mental health, either if it's volunteer-based or part-time based on the side, just so that you're starting to accumulate the relevant clinical experience that you need to be able to move towards a doctorate. Obviously, the doctorate's competitive. We know that. We know it takes time. But it can help you to move into better kind of experience roles once you've come out of university whilst you're still waiting to get onto the doctorate. So it just takes time. You've just got to persevere with it, and you've just got to be smart about, okay, I don't have any experience. I just need to think about how I can start building myself up gradually in a sensible, reasonable, realistic way rather than trying to rush to the top. The more that you try to rush, the more that you're just going to be hit with rejection, because people are going to see that you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Employers know the field. Employers know when someone is being genuine versus someone who just wants to do it for the sake of moving ahead. So it's important that you spend time on yourself to identify your interests, your values, what excites you about the field. And again, like, just because you've done work experience with children doesn't mean that that has to be the case for the rest of your career. You might start off with children and then you'd be like, actually, I want to work with adults now. So you might get some experience with adults. And then after that, you might get experience with patients with learning disabilities. And that way, if you're applying for a doctorate and you've got 3 different types of experiences under your belt within a couple of years, you've got lots to demonstrate on your personal statement. It makes the job easier for you. Otherwise, you're going to be sat there thinking, I've not got enough to write about because I've just done one job role for the past 2 or 3 years. And I've known people to do that. They've been in job roles for 5 years and they're wondering why they're not getting ahead. And it's like, well, what have you done to really understand how the work in psychology varies between services, between populations, between treatments, between disorders? Different kinds of things are going on in different services. So when you're applying for a doctorate program, they're expecting some level of maturity and experience to be able to get to that level and apply for those kinds of courses. Oh, I'm glad it's been helpful. What would be the jobs that I could look for while studying? And so I've just mentioned them, Ali. Again, if you just go back through this actual recording, you'll find that, like I said, rather than focusing on the actual jobs, focus on the services and the locations that you actually are in, and think about the mental health services that are around you that you can get involved in. I actually had, this is the advice, if you take on this advice, it will help you. I had a student message me from Kenya. I don't even help people in Kenya. And they take on this learning because they apply it to their location. They weren't focused on titles, they were focused on looking at areas where mental health projects were going on in Kenya, and they ended up finding an internship where they were able to access and get some experience. And it's amazing now what they've been able to achieve. But obviously, if a person is just kind of fixated upon certain roles and certain kind of like popular titles that people seem to be getting, then that's only going to hinder your progress. So it's about broadening your perspective in terms of the way that you approach psychology careers. It's not as simple as just going for one job role and being like, that's it, I'm not going to do anything else until I get onto training. It's about exploring the field and understanding how psychological services exist in different capacities with different kinds of people. So think about that, Ali. Think about the area that you live in. Think about what kinds of services exist in the area. Think about if you're open to commuting. If you can commute, can you commute to a service that is a little bit far out but has kind of more things going on? Just you have to think about practically what is possible for you as well. And then you have to start searching in that way, whether it be through Google, through certain search engines. That is up to you what you want to use. Thank you, your services and YouTube channel. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad it's been helpful. Stacey's just saying, you're so interesting and knowledgeable. Lols. I'm not really. I'm just trying to help. Would you say some sort of postgrad education would be required for a doctorate program? I'm currently undergraduate forensics psych student looking for work experience to complement my studies. Currently applied for mentor for prison leavers. Yeah, as I think this would be invaluable experience. What would you suggest? Would you suggest? So obviously, like forensics is a completely like specific field in itself. And so what people tend to do is, if you have a look at the criteria for the doctorate program that you want to go into, it will probably say must have forensic mental health experience. Forensic mental health experience means working with criminology and criminal behaviors or friending behaviors in some kind of secure capacity. Working with offenders or prison leavers that are integrating back into the community, absolutely. They've got that criminal kind of element to their presentation, I guess, like their history even. So, working with those people, you'll probably kind of be looking to identify some of the things that they've been through in their history. Again, it depends on the kind of service that you're with and what kinds of interventions and treatments that they actually run. But again, that's a really, really good role to have, and that would probably complement your work if you're wanting to go down the doctorate program for forensic, because that's the kind of experience that they're typically looking for, is to have some kind of forensic clinical experience prior to actually applying for the program. And I think also you've got to be, for some of the routes in forensic psychology, you've actually got to be situated in a service where you can fulfill those competencies for the forensic doctorate. So when you look at the roles that you're doing, think about whether you can actually meet the competencies within the services that you're in. Because again, that will help you to identify whether that's a good service to build networks with. This is again another reason why you want to do work experience and not just rush your way, because when it comes to especially like counseling doctorates or psychotherapy routes where you have to find your own placements, Networking and building relationships is really important. If you have done a certain role somewhere and then you know that you can go back there for placements, it's going to be very easy for you to establish yourself and be like, hey, I'm back. Can you offer me a placement? I'll do this many hours for you if you sign me off, and I'll see patients for you at the same time. It's a lot easier to manage yourself when you are trying to find those kinds of placements. As well in health psychology as well, like it's very heavy in terms of finding your placement. So if you build your experiences in services and organizations where they fulfill health competencies or those kinds of competencies that the doctorate program focuses on, then it's going to make the job a lot easier for you when you come to that point and you're looking for placements. Typically, the doctorate programs and the universities do help you, like you have a supervisor that does help you in some way to find placements. But at doctorate level, they're not going to be spoon feeding you stuff. They're going to be expecting you to go out and be proactive yourself and look for things. They might give you some information, but at the end of the day, they're expecting you to kind of do the legwork. So if you've done all the experience beforehand, if you've established those rapports and networks, you will just be making the job a lot easier for yourself if you're wanting to take those kinds of routes. I have experience working as an honorary AP in an autism service and currently working as an autism specialist student mentor. How do I know when I have an experience? Well, only you know that, Elizabeth. So what about the roles that you have right now tells you that you're not ready? Having an overwhelming sense of doubt, is a problem. Having an overwhelming sense of doubt where you know that, oh, damn, I don't think I can do this. Like, this is just not going to happen for me. Like, I'm just not ready for it. If you're having an overwhelming sense of it, then obviously it might be that you have to gain further experience. But a little bit of doubt is actually you just being cautious and making sure that you have everything that you need to be able to apply. And also, what's the worst that can happen if you were to apply? If you were to apply, what's the worst that can happen? Would you rather apply for the sake of it, just to kind of see what the process is like, have zero expectations about getting on, just familiarize yourself with the process and see what happens? That way, the next time that you approach the application, you'll be a lot more knowledgeable, a lot more aware of how it works, and a lot more kind of, I guess, the next time you write your personal statement, you'll naturally have more to write and you'll probably naturally have more to say and expand on. So again, is there anything that you're losing from actually applying, even if you don't feel completely ready for it? Now, of course, if you have zero experience and you want to go for a doctorate, you have to think about things realistically. You know, are you just doing it because you're trying to push your luck, or are you doing it because you actually feel ready? Like, you have to be honest with yourself and you have to hold yourself accountable and responsible for your own decisions. So I think lots of people do experience like imposter syndrome and worry, but just note that it's about recognizing how much of that you're experiencing. Do you have evidence for your imposter syndrome? Are you actually not meeting any of the requirements or competencies that they're asking for? Like, is it that you're not kind of, I guess, any of the work that you've done is not reflective of the doctorate program that you want to go into? If you can't answer any of those questions and actually you do meet the competencies, you do meet the expectations, you do meet the requirements, then what's the worst that can happen if you were to apply? May as well give it a shot and see what happens. If you've got an MSc in clinical psych, that's great. You've got the work experience and you seem to have the academic experience as well. So again, you don't need a master's to apply for a doctorate in psychology, not the clinical or the educational anyway. But if you have that, then what have you got from that that can help you to get onto the doctorate course, that has prepared you for the doctorate course? And again, it's about identifying the evidence that you have that will help you to make a rational judgment whether you want to apply or not. And only you know that. I know it's easy to seek reassurance from other people, but really look at yourself, look at the details. The reason why we have a lot of uncertainty is because we're not willing to look at the details. We're just trying to like skim over stuff and be like, oh my God, I can't do it. And the next thing you know, you're like passing out an opportunity. When actually, if you just look at the details, if you offer yourself that certainty yourself, by looking at the specifics and seeing, actually, how do I meet this? Do I actually feel ready to do these things that the job description and person specification is asking of me? If you feel ready, if you want to give it a go for it. What's the worst that can happen? And then Ali is just asking, I know it's not a related subject, but do we need a master's to apply? Oh, I just answered that. heard it's not necessary, but the field's getting more and more competitive. Okay, so with competition, competition exists everywhere. It exists everywhere. If you weren't in psychology and if you were in law or construction or whatever, the same competition would exist there. Competition exists everywhere. So we have to let go of, oh, I'm not going to do this because there's too much competition. Because competition exists literally everywhere. The point is they want to know you as a person and the work that you've done. So the more that you focus on your own self-development, the more confident you will be when you write your personal statement, when you turn up to that interview, when you approach the whole process of applying. And that will only help you to focus on the areas where your energy is best used. The way that you're kind of, I guess, able to apply yourself in the best way. Obviously, if you focus so much on competition, all you're going to be faced with is scarcity, worry, fear, anxiety. It's not helping the situation. It's not helping you to focus on your self-development. All you're focusing on is numbers. And yes, having a master's can help, but it doesn't necessarily make you more desirable if you're not, if you're an academic student with zero clinical experience, then you know they're looking for experience as well as academia as well. So if you've got the experience for academia from your undergrad and then you've spent your time getting experience, then you could make a great candidate for the clinical doctorate anyway, for any kind of doctorate that allows you to do it without a master's. But yeah, having a master's can also help, but I don't necessarily think it gives everybody an advantage automatically just because they've got a master's. So it's up to you to think, do I want to spend a year doing a master's? What kind of master's do I want to do? Or would I be better spending that time getting experience, because that's an area where I really feel like I need the growth in. So again, you have to sit with yourself, reflect on what it is that you need, and focus on the areas where you can be kind of, I guess, applying yourself in the best way. Hi Salma, I still need to get back to you. I will get back to you today. I haven't forgotten about you. It's just been a crazy ass busy day. Okay, Stacey, how old is too old? Okay, so I think the average, 27 now, doing my degree part-time, so that will take me to 33. And then we'll need some post-grad study and work experience. I'll be pushing 40, but fully qualified with still no work experience. I feel like 40, you'd expect someone to have a fair few years of experience behind them. You look like you're already successful. It makes me, no. I'm not, I don't know what you deem as successful, Stacey, but I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not a psychologist. I am a PWP, but I decided to take on a journey of coaching and mentoring and entrepreneurship, which is what I do now by delivering this service. So that's my story. But going back to you, the thing about psychology is it's progressive. So even if you were a 40-year-old psychologist, you don't stop there. Because if you think about it, you will have psychologists that have been qualified for years. And say a psychologist has been qualified for 15 years and not done a single CPD, not done a single additional piece of training, not done any kind of additional like research or kind of any kind of like ways to self-develop, versus someone who's been qualified for a couple of years but has done everything to increase their development. The employer is obviously going to see the person who is more proactive, that has got a lot more kind of, I guess, enthusiasm and motivation to do certain training as the more kind of, I guess, useful candidate for their service. Psychology is not just about doing a job and doing training and then sitting and doing nothing. You have to continuously progress in your career. It won't be as much as obviously doing a doctorate, like, you know, you've done the doctorate, okay, you've done the doctorate, that's 3 years of intense work. You don't have to do that same level of work every single time to build yourself up, but you will have to keep up to date with CPDs. Society changes all the time, is changing all the time, which means that the people in society who have mental health problems and need mental health support are constantly changing too. So if you're a psychologist that has qualified 15 years ago and has stayed with the same approaches and hasn't really developed, you're kind of not really keeping up with what society is experiencing in the here and now. So that's why, again, psychology is not just about doing one thing and stopping. It's about continuous progressive development. The great thing is that once you actually get into that core profession, once you actually get into a position where you've got the doctorate or the psychotherapy or the core training that you need under you, a lot of services, especially if you're in the NHS, they provide you with internal CPD training on in-house, so you don't have to pay extra money for it. But obviously, if you're a private practitioner, then you would have to pay for additional CPD and you'd have to take interest in that yourself. But in the NHS, they typically, if the service has a need for it, they'll be like, okay, you're a psychologist, we have a need for EMDR therapy, we're going to send you on training to do that. And so they have the funding to do that. But again, it differs between service and where you're located, and basically how the service that you're in has been set up. So I think, Stacey, with your situation, yes, if you're doing it part-time, it can take a little bit longer. But at the end of the day, are you able to get that work experience part-time alongside of doing your degree? Because then once you've come out of your degree at 33, you'll have a full kind of degree, but then you'll also have lots of experience under you. And even if you are older, I kid you not, mature students have such an advantage when it comes to psychological therapies and training, because there's a sense of maturity that you have that not many younger people have. I mean, yes, there are mature younger people, of course, but because of your life experience, because of what you've been through, because of maybe the career change or what's brought you to this career at this time in your life, you've got so much to offer in terms of life experience that you can demonstrate in your personal statements, your interviews, and again, like, you can use that experience to help you kind of, I guess, build the experience that you need and work towards a doctorate. With any kind of doctorate, there's no guarantee that you'll get it onto it straight away. So again, it's helpful to have some kind of a plan, like a plan B, even a plan C, so that if you are worrying about how old you're getting, and if you do want to focus on other areas of your life, like if you have children and you want to give more time to them rather than focusing on when you're going to get onto training, someone who may once wanted to have done the doctorate may then opt in for a psychotherapy route. Or they might decide to give up their clinical doctorate and go for the counselling doctorate instead. In psychology, what you'll find is that the counselling and clinical doctorates, they are different, but they're similar when you get into practice. So sometimes, a post for a clinical psychologist can be filled by a counselling psychologist and vice versa. Because at the end of the day, you're working with similar approaches and you're holding that kind of doctorate title, which means that you're able to fulfill the kind of psychologist role, no matter what kind of psychologist it is. The same applies for when you're a clinical psychologist and you want to work in forensic. Because of that clinical training, you're able to go into a forensic field and work in forensic. And so again, like, it's only as you're kind of working your way up where you have the crazy hardships. But once you actually get on training, once you actually kind of move your way into training and through training, it gets a lot easier. So it's about thinking about that end goal and thinking about doing everything in a realistic manner to help you get there and setting your expectations on the way up there as well. Oh, I'm glad to hear that was good. I just see it as 20 years until I retire and I panic. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to retire if you don't want to. If you really enjoy the job, you could continue doing it on a private basis and just keep doing what you want to do. I think, you'll find that people who retire do different things as well. Like, they finally get in touch with their values and what's important to them and start kind of exploring different things in life. So age is really just a number. I cannot emphasize that enough. And, I think lots of people in my position, it's funny because I'm 31, lots of 31-year-olds who are PWPs would be fretting. They would be fretting, thinking, oh my God, I'm just a PWP. This is the mindset that we need to distance ourselves from. Not that we're just PWPs. We are PWPs. We help people, but we just have a different level of training. Even if it is brief, doesn't mean it's less valuable, doesn't mean the work that we do is not valuable. It's still all valuable, but you have to adopt a mindset that sees it as valuable, that doesn't just see as how can I move on to the next stage every single time, because then you're actually missing out on what you could be doing with yourself in different ways and how you could be making the most of the career that you have. And there's lots of ways to build your career. You don't just have to stay in NHS being an employee. There's lots of ways to go locum, to go private, to work with different kinds of people in different ways. And as long as you have good intentions to do that ethically and have all the right protocols in place, then there's lots of things that you can do. I am prime example of that. So I would say that age is just a number, and it's up to you what you decide to do at the age that you are at, and making the most of your current experiences rather than focusing on, oh, where am I going to go next? What am I going to do next? And yeah, that can happen sometimes when you are surrounded by lots of people in the psychology field that are just kind of, I guess, pulled into this invisible rat race, and they're trying to just get to the top. And actually, where is the top? Because when you do get to the top, when you do get to a clinical psychologist post, when you do get to becoming a, accredited practitioner, the work doesn't get easier. It doesn't get easier, it gets harder because then you have to actually have a full caseload of patients. Then you have people that you might have to supervise. It does give you a good salary, but if you think about it, again, it's subjective to what you think is a good salary. Earning 35 to 40K, maybe some people don't actually see that as the best salary. So again, you've got to think about where your values lie and whether chasing to the top is actually not giving you what you actually want. So being very, very kind of specific about what it is that's important to you can help you to conceptualize and kind of put things into perspective. I just want to know how to get experience in other support areas, populations, e.g. switching from, I know a lot of skills, but how do you compete with applicants who have experience in this? Well, I guess you have to show that you've got an interest. So if you do want to work with other patients, then you have to demonstrate how your experience and your maturity has led you from transferring those skills as an LD practitioner into working with patients with dementia. What similarities do you find? What differences do you find between the populations? And again, dissecting all of that information can help you to think about how you can make it relevant to the role that you're applying for. So I would definitely focus on that. Applicants. Yeah, when it comes to applying for things as well, they're not looking for people that just meet the criteria. They're looking for you as an individual. If you can show up in the interview room, keen, interested, even if you haven't got the experience, if you can demonstrate awareness, if you can demonstrate that you've read articles, if you can demonstrate that you have taken a genuine interest where you've applied yourself in your own personal time to those areas, then again, you can demonstrate that in your interview. You don't just have to speak about experiences. Sometimes speaking about what you've done to gain awareness, even if you haven't directly worked with those patients, can also help you. So yeah, really focusing on how to demonstrate that genuine passion and interest is what is really going to help you to set yourself aside from the others. So again, doing some kind of reflective practice on that might be helpful to kind of really hone in on those particular things. Salma, is a psychotherapy route 5 years, even if you have an undergraduate degree in psychology and work experience? So it depends on the route. And I think we spoke about this. So with the psychotherapy routes, it depends what route you take. It depends what route you actually do. So obviously, if you do a route that requires you to do a certification, a diploma, and then a master's, then you're going to have to do all 3 parts, which take up around 4 to 5 years. It depends on the route that you take. Sometimes you'll get 2 courses that are integrative psychotherapy courses, but they're laid out completely differently. And because they're laid out completely differently, the time that it takes is different. So again, choosing a course is not just about focusing on time. It's about looking at the modules, looking at whether it covers things that actually interest you. And in all honesty, when I was a naive 20-something-year-old, I would never have approached psychology careers like this. I would have approached it in the way that I see lots of people doing it, which is why I empathize with you. I know you're trying to move ahead. I know it's just about, oh, what's the best course that I can do so that it gives me everything that I need, when actually that's not what's going to get you the job satisfaction and the job fulfillment that you're looking for. And it's more about looking at actually what courses fulfill modules that actually explore the interests that I have. Like for now, if I was to do a course again, I would do some kind of master's course on well-being and dealing with kind of everyday burnout, and also something in terms of occupational kind of psychological well-being, because one area that really interests me is staff well-being. Staff well-being if I ever do a doctorate, I'd probably do a thesis on staff wellbeing, because that's an area that I'm really, really passionate about. Go back 5, 6 years, I would never have thought that. But because I've allowed myself to focus on getting experience of exploring my interests, giving myself time to figure out what I want to do, I'm now so much more confident about that. And I would now go for a master's. I don't have a master's, but if I was to do a master's, I would probably do one now as opposed to back then, because honestly, I had no clue as to what kind of master's I wanted to do. And again, this is why it's important to think about these things, because nobody shares these things when you're coming out of university. Nobody offers this kind of approach at looking at psychology careers. So that's why I'm sharing this information with you. I've noticed that for most of healthcare assistant support work applications, it requires a driving license. Yes, it still apply. If you don't have a driving license, you can demonstrate that I don't have a driving license, but I have a keen and willingness to drive to different locations as required. Like if you're okay with taking the bus and taking the train, in London, for example, it's quite easy to get around on the trains and the tubes and the buses. But if you work in kind of rural areas or more kind of suburban areas, you might need a car, in which case you might have to obviously have a car for practical purposes. But again, like you could ring them up and ask them, you know, like I've noticed that you need me to have a driver's license. I was just wondering how far things are, because actually I'm quite happy to use the bus and public transport. So actually, is the distance between the actual locations going to be quite far? Will I actually need a car? And just have those conversations. Like, again, deal with your uncertainty by providing yourself with the certainty and asking those questions, calling people up, having conversations. Be proactive in your approach. Stacey is just asking, just in general, one, a job states it requires level 5 or equivalent, or be able to provide evidence of this. Would this mean a level 5 education, or would a degree? So yeah, so a master's is a level 7, an undergraduate is a level 6. A level 5 could be, I think it's like NVQ. I think that's what it is. Is it level 5? It could be NVQ. It could be NVQ or college base, or BTEC base, or vocational course base. I would ask them, I would ring them up. Sometimes this is the case with roles, is they're so vague about what certain things mean. You have to literally ring them up and say, what does level 5 mean? And if you already have a degree, then you can overstep that. So this is the question that I actually had in my membership a couple of weeks ago, and I'll just answer it here since we're talking about it. But some of the students wanted to apply for roles which basically required you to have an NVQ. And although a degree is a higher level than an NVQ, some employers want you to still have the NVQ, because the NVQ focuses on specific pieces of information. So your degree might be in anything, but an NVQ could be in like health and social care. So obviously they want to make sure that you've got those health and social care knowledge and skills. So they want to make sure that you can do that. So in that case, it might be that you have to go to college, do the NVQ, or you could ask them and say, look, I've got a degree where I can demonstrate these things that you're asking for from the NVQ or from the diploma. Like, if I can demonstrate it through my experience, would that be okay? And usually they say, yes, it's fine. But sometimes people are quite pedantic and they want you to have like exactly what it says in terms of qualifications. Typically with essential and desirable criteria, you can be quite sort of good at demonstrating how you meet the different criteria in different ways. But when it comes to qualifications, you typically have to meet the qualifications. You have to meet the qualifications. If it is NVQ or diploma level, then just have a chat with them and just say, look, I have a degree in a relevant subject, if it is relevant, and just say, does that feel okay? Usually it overrules and oversteps the NVQ, but sometimes people, like I said, are pedantic. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so just as I said, ring them up, have a chat that you have the level 6 once you have it, and see if they are happy to accept that. Typically, they're fine. The only reason they ask for stuff like this is because during the pandemic, this is my theory anyway, during the pandemic, because lots of people lost their jobs, hairdressers, people that aren't even in the health field, they all started applying for mental health jobs because those were the only jobs that were available. And what they found was employers found an influx of non-mental health people trying to access jobs for the sake of wanting to pay bills and things like that. So what they did was that they became a little bit more strict about how they filter through certain candidates by making sure that they have some kind of a health background. So even if you don't have, like, obviously experience, if you can't demonstrate that, then obviously you've got to have the level 5. But if you've got experience and if you've got health related or transferable skills that are relevant to the role, then it could be fine that you could actually apply for that and you wouldn't even have to call them up and ask them. Usually it's fine. It's just because during the pandemic, I feel that lots of people who aren't mental health keen or mental health enthusiasts have been applying for jobs because of the whole pandemic issue of people losing their jobs. So yeah, that is what I've heard through the grapevine. Okay, so we're coming towards an hour now, and I think I'm going to end it here. I hope this was helpful for you. As you know, I do offer services where I help with constructing personal statements, CVs, articulating yourselves in interviews, and I have a membership that is extremely affordable that allows you to do that on a self-learning basis if you aren't able to work with me on a one-to-one basis. And there's going to be more kind of changes to my membership coming soon, where it becomes different to the way that it's structured right now, but still valuable, and even more so valuable. And myself and my lovely people on my team are helping me to kind of create that right now. So hopefully you will hear more about the next intake for the membership and the differences that are coming up soon. But yeah, if you want to work on a one-to-one basis, you just have to drop me a DM. Otherwise, tune in next month when I will do a live on another topic within psychology. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. Use the group as and when you need it. Connect with each other, make friends, buddy up, whatever you need to do what you need to do, you do you. And I hope you have a lovely evening, and I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.